Samuel Boyd Fielder Jr., United States Marine Corps, Korea, the Forgotten War. I had the great pleasure and opportunity of interviewing Samuel Fielder in Abington, Maryland. It was March 8th, 2007, and Sam, if I can call one of my veterans a patriot, Sam was a patriot. He was 74 years old at the time of the interview, passed away just recently, November 2021, at the age of 88. Oh, I lived in Hartford County, Maryland. Just a great man. He was a poet, folks, after the war. He wrote many poems, one about the Korean War, the Forgotten War. He wrote a poem about the flag, which the words of it are in this video description, so make sure you read that. I put it in the video description. And he actually recites one of his poems in this video, so I'm really excited to share that. But just an amazing man. I just love this guy. He served with the 7th Marine Regiment, 1st Marine Division in Korea, enlisted in the military in September of 1951. His brother served in World War II. His father was in World War I with the same name, Samuel Boyd Fielder, and he passed away, I think, in 1987. Sam served with our artillery. He was an artilleryman, and just tells a great story about what happened in his experience in Korea. So I really appreciate his story. I want to thank Brandon Glidden again. Brandon, thank you for making it possible for these stories to be heard. Brandon has supported a lot of my Korean War stories, and I thank you, Brandon. And look in this camera again, thank you. God bless you. And you're such a wonderful guy to support my work and your service in our country, in the United States Army, and what you're doing. I appreciate you, Brandon. All right. Folks, I'd like to encourage you, if you'd like to become a sponsor of one of these videos, please, there's information in the video description. Below the video, there's information on my website, larrycapetto.com. Click on Sponsor a Vet, or in the comment section of the video where you go to comment. I hope you do comment. I like reading your comments. You can click on a link to help donate to this work. No commercials here, no monetizing here, folks. This is straight from the heart, a labor of love. These are my heroes, my unsung heroes. You know, our young people look for role models and heroes today. I found mine in all the veterans I've interviewed over the years. So my heart's full today. I wanted to share again, my documentary series is called Lest They Be Forgotten. If we don't remember, we're going to forget. I purposely named it. It's an afterthought. We must remember. An act of remembrance is an act of honor. So Lest They Be Forgotten on the Voices of History channel. All these veterans, all these voices of history, all these stories over the years. It's such a blessing to bring them to you. So I thank God for it every day. I really do. It's been an honor to serve my God and my country through the lens of my camera. So share these videos, folks. Subscribe to this channel. Let's keep this thing going. And I'll talk to you soon. God bless you. The year that you went into Korea.
The year I went into Korea.
Actually, when you went into the Marines.
In the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
Okay, it was September the 17th, 1951.
Okay, so
yeah.
Did you feel a duty to serve your country at that time?
Well, if you want to know the truth, I had always planned on joining the Marine Corps. My dad was Marine World War I, my brother Marine World War II. And I had planned on going in with my first cousin in August, but I had lost my driver's license for speeding. So I wanted to get my driver's license back, so I got my driver's license back, and I was dating Doris, and she was 15, and I was 18 in high school. And as over the summer, I had to have somebody take us if we ever got to go anyplace, because I didn't have a driver's license. But then when I got my driver's license back, we went out. We went to drive-in movie one night. We got talking about something, and I got mad at her. Next morning, I joined the Marine Corps. And on the 17th of September, they inducted us, and we left Baltimore and went to Paris Island.
So what were you trained? Every Marine's a rifleman. Did you stay a rifleman? Did you do something else?
No. I asked for the infantry, and I had an infantry spec number. But when we got to California, now we had I guess you could say it was either a streak of luck or a fluke or something, but the plane that they flew us out on, there was about 30 to a plane, had engine trouble all the way out. And we were down in every state for the plane to be worked on. Well, we got there 24 hours after the rest of the guys. But when we got there, they had already shipped all of them out to Tent Camp 1 for infantry training. And we stayed there another week till they got enough guys in. They shipped us off to Tent Camp 2 infantry training. That was at Camp Pendleton. And 1 month into infantry training, they called us to formation, said, you guys go back to your tents, pack your gear. You're going to go to Camp Del Mar for supporting arms. And we had a choice between tanks, Amtracs, and artillery. Well, I didn't want to be closed up in a tank. I didn't know what Amtrac was, so I took artillery. And I ended up being what they called a cannon cocker. I fired the guns.
So when did you go to Korea? What month and what year?
April 1952.
52.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you're there in April, so it's not real cold like it was in the wintertime. So how long did you spend in Korea?
I spent a year and 17 days.
Okay. Why don't your first time in combat, obviously.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You're in a combat situation. Are you in North Korea, South Korea?
We were in South Korea.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you're fighting the Chinese, obviously.
Fighting the Chinese and the North Koreans both.
Can you just, Sam, walk me into several engagements with the enemy, what you were doing, what you encountered, and tell me a little bit about the enemy?
All right. Now, first of all, let you understand, the artillery is not up front with the infantry. And we fired in support of them.
Sure.
Okay. Now, what they were doing at that time, they had just moved the 1st Marine Division from the east coast of Korea to the west coast, which was above Seoul, and that's the reason they moved them, because the Chinese, the word was the Chinese was going to attack Seoul again. So they put the 1st Marine Division in there, because the North Koreans and the Chinese had a saying, don't attack the yellow legs, because we wore leggings and they called us yellow legs. They don't run. That's what they said. Okay, now, so we spent the last, the whole time I was in Korea and until it ended, approximately two whole years, we holding the parallel. They didn't want us to take any ground. They didn't want us to lose any ground. And it was up and down those hills for the infantry, and we fired to support them. And we fired so much artillery that word got back, well, not them, but as I've heard, now whether it's factual or not, I don't know, that there was more artillery fired in Korea in 3 years than it was in World War I, World War II, and Vietnam put together. And you had a lot of guys that would, whenever they saw an artilleryman, they'd throw their arms around him. And a lot of them would get mad at him, because once in a while somebody, I'm sure, got caught by a short round or something or other.
So again, I know you're firing in support of the 7th Marine Regiment?
7th Marine Regiment, yes.
So, I mean, again, you're in combat?
Yes.
Are they firing artillery back? I mean,
So, yes, we got hit at times, but they never, ever did more than wound somebody. The Chinese and the North Koreans had a way of firing they walked their rounds in. If they had fired some of them at the same coordinates twice, it might have went just a little bit farther and got some, because every time they walked them in, it was our gun that got hit. And it would hit the big mound of dirt in front of the gun, and the next round would take out our aiming stakes. Well, if they'd have fired two in the same place, one might have went just a little bit farther and went right in that pit, and it would have wiped out the gun and the whole crew. But it never happened. Now, we got caught several times, and like we'd send us out on a roving gun, or the whole battery would go out and move into a different position. We really got caught bad one time, and but still nobody got hurt.
What about the infantry? What kind of, are they sustaining a lot of casualties as you're holding the 38th parallel, or?
Oh yes, I think they say that a third of the casualties happened holding that parallel in Korea. I know there was a lot at the very start of it, and up till about January or February of '51, there was a lot of casualties.
What had you known, or what did you know at the time about what happened at the Chosin Reservoir? Did you know anything about all that?
Well, yes, that happened before. Well, that happened while I was still in high school. That happened in late November and early part of December of 1950.
Right, but you didn't hear anything back home about that, did you, or did you?
Yes, they came back. I heard it on the news that the 1st Marine Division had been annihilated. Now, I might be the only one that heard it, but I did hear that. And but it wasn't the case. They still came out of it. And I think it was the 2nd or the 7th Division, Army Division, was up there with them. And there's also some English. It was up there. Some English troops was up there with them too.
Weren't they overrun, the Army?
Oh yeah, they were overrun. And see, in that Chosin Reservoir, they weren't equipped for that cold weather. There was very few of those officers that ever been in that kind of cold weather. Now, Chesty Puller, who is the Marines' Marine, you know, he had spent time in northern China before World War II, and he knew what that vicious weather could be, and he tried to get as much gear as he could for his men. And the excuse me, the commander of the 1st Marine Division, O.P. Smith, he didn't like the idea of the 1st Marine Division being spread out. There's only one road in, and it was in and out. I mean, you came out the same way you went in. And he slowed the division down. Now, he was catching it from I Corps and to speed up and keep on moving. And he was slowing it down because they were seeing signs of the Chinese. And in the Far East Command wouldn't recognize it, that the Chinese were getting into it. But they were getting them just about every day. And the old Marines knew what a Chinese looked like, you know.
How close did you get to the enemy, or were you always pretty far away, or did you ever get to see them?
I never really got to see. Yes, I saw some we killed, but I never got to get up to the front lines. You go in, they put you in a certain place, and you stay there.
Were there field hospitals or battalion aid stations or MASH
They were
units, or
back. They were back way back by division or farther back. I was in one time, not for a wound, but for a medical reason, and it seemed to be a good ways back.
Now, you were there through the winter of 52 into 53.
Yeah.
So tell me about the cold and how that affected your operation.
Well, the officers told us it got down to 27.5 degrees below zero. And it would be so cold that it'd take a while firing those guns before they would recoil back. Sometimes we'd push them along, you know. After you got a few rounds to them, then the oil warmed up and everything, and they recoiled okay. But not at first.
Well, just tell me about the living conditions, your clothing, and how the cold, how you slept, how you ate, drank water.
Well, we were well equipped. By time I got there, all the outfits were well equipped. They had they called them those thermo boots. They called them Mickey Mouse boots, and in fact, they keep your feet too warm. And but if you just stood around and didn't do anything and didn't move, your feet would still get cold. But I didn't wear them that often because in our where our gun was and our whole outfit. We had bunkers, and we had kept a stove in the bunker. We also kept a stove in our tent. And believe it or not, I never ate C rations the whole time I was in Korea. Well, we had a mess tent. Ate a lot of dehydrated food and all that kind of stuff, but never ate any.
Well, what was the hardest part of your job in Korea? Or the most difficult things you had to do?
Most difficult? Tell you the truth, I never thought any of it was difficult. I was young, and I was in good physical shape, and I guess the most difficult thing we had to do is sometimes we'd fire for 72 to 80 hours without stopping, and it just wore you out. And when the Chinese was making a push, then we had to fire. We never stopped firing, and they told us the maximum rate of fire you can put through a 105 is 4 rounds a minute. Well, for a solid 20 minutes, we fired without a let up. And I figured it up when we got through how many rounds we had fired. We had to give a count of it. And we had fired 7.5 rounds a minute. They said 4 rounds. That's how fast we fired. The barrels on our guns got so hot that it burnt the oil up, the hydraulic oil up in it to make it recoil. And we had one guy, he was a maintenance man in the outfit, and he said, now, I told the guys, he says, now, and he had me to hold this tube of oil. He says, now, when you fire this round, crank the barrel down. He said, I'll take open it up, you squirt that in there. We did it so quick, we only missed 1 round.
I can't imagine firing that long, and the concussions of the explosions. Does everybody just get used to it after a while? You don't even listen anymore?
Well, most of it. Now, some guys did lose their hearing. We had one guy on our gun, a real tall fellow from Ohio. He lost his hearing, but it never affected mine. But what we would do, now see, one guy always had the earphones on, just like what you've got on now, because he had to take the orders and everything. And that would protect his ears. But most of us, what we would do is when we fired, we'd turn one away and cover this one, because you'd be doing something with the other hand.
Did you ever think that what you're doing is killing people, or did you just, it's your job, you didn't really think about it?
Well, you know, when you're fighting somebody and they're fighting you, you don't really think of them as people. It's just somebody, if you don't kill them, they're going to kill you. And we knew the guys up on the line needed all the help they could get. Mm-hmm.
What about the infantry and the casualties? Were you around any of that? Did you have to help with any of the wounded at all?
No, I didn't. No. Well, one time I did, but they weren't Americans. They were South Koreans. And what had happened is we had a roadway, a passway, came down a hill behind our outfit, and the North Koreans and the Chinese could see that pass. And these guys were out working along there, and they shot them up with white phosphor, and we had to go out and get them. But that's the only time I really had to help with.
Did you lose any friends or anybody wounded or killed in your area?
I lost one friend. He got there about 2 months after I got there, and it was an accident. And what had happened is it was his turn to take he was the truck driver for gun 2. I was on gun 3. And it was his turn to take the truck out and get the water. When he came around by our gun, and he parked between gun 2 and gun 3, I took 2 5-gallon cans, went out and got the water for the next day. And I turned and started to walk away, and he pulled up a little bit, and I heard this loud boom. And my friend on our gun, we went through training together and on the same gun there for the whole time we was over there. And he hollered, "Fielder, get down. It's incoming." I said, "That's not incoming." And what had happened is he's moved his truck up, and they had fired the gun that he was on. Had a new boy out of the States. Another guy standing there holding the shell. He said, "My mouth came open, but I couldn't stop him." And it went through the back of the truck and killed the fella. and I had stepped down in just a little bit of a low pace, and it all went over my head, I guess, because it hit sergeant on our gun, and another guy up on gun 4 like to took his arm off. But that was the only friend that I really lost by the way of during the action.
Now, were the Chinese attacking like in human wave attacks, or
Oh.
and how many were there, and how many were there of you guys? I mean, were you outnumbered?
We were always outnumbered. Yeah, they stretched the 1st Marine Division out to where they had a territory to take care of was almost equal to what 2 divisions should have had. They were always outnumbered. And they always had 2 regiments on line, and 1 regiment would be in reserve. They had the 1st Marine Division had 1st Marine Regiment, the 5th Marine Regiment, and the 7th Marine Regiment. So if one of them was up, one of them was in reserve, the other 2 were on line. And if they got hit real hard, then the others would have to come up and support.
Were any of these men from the Chosen Reservoir that survived that, or are they all sent home? I mean,
well, most of them had been rotated home, but there was one guy that came back to our outfit that had, I guess, had been in the reservoir, and he came back for another tour over there, and I met him. And my drill instructors, some of them were Chosin Reservoir men.
is that right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So when you're going through basic training, were they preparing you for what's ahead? I mean, teaching you how to kill and all that?
Oh yeah, you always learn that, but they didn't have time much to tell you about what they'd been through. You know, they might once in a while. I remember one fella, one of them, his name was Dobbs, Corporal Dobbs. He always kept his rifle in good working condition. He said, when I got hit, said, they grabbed my rifle up in a hurry. But we had a Corporal Potter, and he was a little fella. And he said, he says, to this day, my feet still, when it gets cold.
Wow. What does combat sound like?
What's it sound like? Well, it's just a continuous firing of all types of weapons, a lot of hollering and screaming, and sometimes it'll last for quite a while, and sometimes it's just a firefight and it's over with in a few minutes. But it's screaming on both sides, and when we could hear those Chinese coming in with their bugles all the way back. Now, I don't really know how far I was from the front, but we could fire. I would say at the most we was probably half a mile or a mile behind the infantry. And we could hear those bugles and all the not the screaming, but the bugles and things like that on a real cold day or a real cold night when they were attacked. And most are attacked at night.
Do you have any air support at all?
Oh, had great air support.
What's that?
Yes. In fact, the air support really saved that first part of that war. If it hadn't been for air support, they'd have probably got pushed right into the sea.
And so why is the United States in Korea originally? Why did we get involved?
Okay. Because the North Koreans came across the parallel, but there's a little more to it than that. That was Stalin that pumped all this up, and the North Koreans was a well-trained army, and they had. I won't say all of them had been to Russia, but their officers had been to Russia and learned how to train. You know, and it was a real well-trained army, and they were good fighters. No sense knocking them because the enemy, and the Chinese were so many they just mass attacked, and the way they fought is the first line had weapons. The second group had hand grenades. And others had whatever they could pick up on the way through for the ones that got killed in front of them. And they'd come in with knives, they'd come in with weapons, and they'd come in with hand grenades, and they would even rock, stones, anything they'd get their hands on.
Obviously, a lot of them were killed doing that.
Oh yes, they stacked them up like cordwood, and they used them for sandbags to.
So when you're over there fighting, are you conscious of fighting for God and country, or is it just survival?
Well, when you went in, it was for God and country. Mainly country, I suppose. But when you get over there, you just don't give much thought about it, you know. You just get in there and fight. Of course, we always had, we had our church services every month or so. We couldn't come every week, but the chaplains would come around, and a lot of the guys went. Yeah, there was very few that didn't go. The Catholics would have theirs at one time, then all the Protestants would go. But yes, the guys read their Bibles, and they said their prayers, and some of them did, some of them didn't. They may not say them every day. I know the first time we got hit, I was sure saying them, because I thought I'd had it. We had a great captain. His name was Doc Schick, and he wanted to get into a little more of the action. And so he asked if he could move in to take the whole outfit and move into a certain position. And the only thing between us and the North Koreans at that place was an outfit of Amtraks going up and down the Imjim River. And but as the North Koreans already had the place that we were moving into zeroed in, and they could see us going in, but we went in anyway. And we fired about 2 rounds for effect, and here it came. And it's kind of funny. I was on the phones, and I couldn't get them off. Well, by the time the second or third round hit, I got the phones off, and I dove in a hole, but it was so full of guys that didn't have room to be there, and the captain was on top of everybody else. And he was behind us. Well, the first round came over the bank, and hit up on the hill. The second round hit right, like I was telling you, right in front of our gun. And this third round took out the captain's exec pit. But the captain had already evacuated him and his recorder, the man that took the information and gave it to the guns. And they had already gotten in the hole where our gun was at, in the gun pit. So I jumped on top, and I thought, oh, this isn't going to work. I ran around in front of the gun and found a foxhole, and I hollered for one of my buddies and jumped in it. And I stood there, I sat in for a few minutes, and I said the 23rd Psalm. I crawled out of the hole and sat on the bank and watched the rest of the shells come in. That's how, I just felt like it was okay. But when I was standing there with that phone on and they were coming in, the first thought is, uh-oh, I'm not going to see Mom anymore.
Do you feel invincible as a young man? I mean, do people think nothing can happen to me, and
Yes.
then reality
Yes.
sets in, or what?
Yes, you do. You do. I know when I asked my dad if I could join the Marine Corps, and I had a brother who was a year and a half older than me. We're sitting at the breakfast table, and I made up my mind the night before. But I didn't say anything to my brother because I didn't want him going with me. In fact, I didn't ask any of my buddies to go. I didn't want to be responsible for anybody else. And I said to my dad, and it caught him so off guard, and he sat at the head table. My brother sat on his left, and I sat on his right. And he kind of bounced back in his chair, came forward, and he said, yes. And that surprised me, because if he'd have said no, I wouldn't have went. Because that's how much, the respect I had for him, and he was Pop, and he was the boss. But he says, well, if you go in the Marine Corps, they're going to send you to Korea. I said, that's where I want to go. He says, you might get hurt or killed. I said, I don't think so. So that's the way you are. It's the way everybody is. Well, it won't happen to me,
Tell me about the camaraderie of the Marine Corps when in combat.
Oh gosh, the Marines have that saying, "Semper Fi," always faithful. Well, they are, and that's the one thing about the Marine Corps' training. Their training is no tougher than the Army's, the CBs, or any of them. But what they do have discipline, and when they're given an order, they follow it. And over there, it's kind of if you have 6 guns in the outfit, and it's kind of a competition between the guns as to who has the best gun, And of course, everybody thinks theirs is. We thought ours was, and but we were close. We were a close bunch of guys. Excuse me, and the 22nd draft came to. I was in the 20th draft. 22nd draft came to Korea. And we had, when I first got there, we had a lot of guys in the 11th draft, and their time was up and was getting ready to go home. And these guys had never seen an incoming round the whole time they were there. Now, they were in an area on the East Coast called Artillery Valley. I guess there's so many artillery pieces in there. And it's so, the hills are so high on that side, they're mountains, and it's like straight up. And so all the guns was in that one valley. And but they moved over to the West Coast. They got there in March, and I got there in April. They moved the whole division over. And these guys were so salty. And anybody just came into the outfit. After that, they just looked down their nose and made fun of them, and they harassed them all the time. And this one guy I almost got in a fight over it. Anyway, but then this 22nd draft came to Korea, and a lot of these guys were older, had been out in the workforce, and they were drafted. Mm-hmm. And they turned that outfit of ours around. I'm not kidding. These guys, they could build a beautiful parapet, and whenever we got a fire mission, they got that thing off. I mean, I was part of that too, but I always give that 22nd draft the credit for coming in there and changing that outfit, because we had so many guys that didn't care for anything, but these guys, and a lot of them were married, and they wanted to get home too.
Why is Korea referred to as the Forgotten War?
Well, because it was sandwiched in between World War II and Vietnam, and of course World War II is the last all-out victory the United States has won in a war. And Vietnam lasted 10 years. And the media was so much into Vietnam, they're like they are now. They were so much into Vietnam. And they weren't so much into it after Korea. And the United States, the people of the United States after World War II, they weren't ready to go out and have to support another war. They wanted to live their lives, And a lot of the World War II veterans did get called back into Korea, and a lot of them died in Korea. But they wanted to go out and start their lives, and forget about war. And here we were stuck in Korea. And so we never got the publicity. And then the Vietnam veterans, after a while, they got tired of this mess, people spitting on them and cussing them and baby killer and all. They fought back, and they got the recognition they deserved. And they got enough, they had started enough chapters, and they got the Congress behind them. They got their memorial. Of course, they had to pay for it themselves. We paid for ours. They didn't. The country doesn't pay for the memorials. These World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and any they come out of the veterans. Has to pay it. But they actually, if it hadn't been for the Vietnam veterans, what they did we probably wouldn't have a memorial. World War II memorial wouldn't be there. They're the ones that really got that thing started.
Sam, tell me about freedom. What does freedom mean to you, and tell me about the price for freedom?
Well, our memorial has a saying on it: freedom is not free. It's going to cost, it will continue to cost if you want your freedom. And a lot of guys have died for that freedom. And if it's worth somebody dying for, it's worth having. And I heard a beautiful poem about that. Do you want to hear that poem? Now, I never wrote this poem. This is called The Battle of the Flag. A protest raged on a courthouse lawn. Around a makeshift stage they assembled on. 1,500 or more, they say, had come to burn a flag that day. A young man held up the folded flag, cursed it, and called it a dirty old rag. An old soldier passed through that angry crowd, his rusty shotgun shouldered proud. His uniform jacket was old and tight. He'd polished each button, shiny and bright. He crossed that stage with a soldier's grace, till he and that young man were standing face to face. Freedom of speech, the old soldier said, is worth dying for. A lot of good men are dead. Now you can stand here on this courthouse lawn and talk us down from dusk till dawn. But before any flag gets burned this day, this old soldier is going to have his say. My father died on a foreign shore, in a war, they said, was to end all wars. But before my brother and I were full grown, we were fighting in a war of our own. My brother died on Iwo Jima's beach, in the shadow of a hill he couldn't quite reach, where 5 good men raised that flag so high the whole damn world could see it fly. And I still have this bum leg I drag, fighting for that same old flag. Now there is but one shot left in the old gun. So now is the time for you to decide which one of you will follow our lead to stand and die for what you believe. For sure as there is a rising sun, you'll burn in hell before this flag burns, son. Well, that riot never came to pass, and a can of gas got set aside as they walked away to talk about what they'd heard this day. And the young man that called it a dirty rag handed the old soldier the folded flag. Well, the battle of the flag this day was won by a tired old soldier and his rusty shotgun, who for one last time had to prove to some the flag may fade, but these colors never run. Isn't that a good poem?
Cool. Who wrote that?
We don't know. We don't know. We got it. It was on.
It's powerful.
It is. It's. I wish the guy would come forward that wrote it.
And you write poems too.
I write poems too. Yeah. I got one of my own. I did the flag.
Do you have anything about Korea that you've written?
Oh yes, I've got quite a few about Korea.
Do you have something not real long that you can tell me on the camera now that you got? Remember, or you've got them to give to me, right?
I've got them right there. Every one of my Korean poems is on that CD, and the Forgotten War poem it's on the CD too, but it's also in the book, and it's also
Forgotten War poem. Is that a long one?
It's longer than that. The one I just did. Yes.
Oh, and it's on there though.
It's on there. Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me kind of wind down the interview, and then I'm going to take some pictures of us. But we've talked about the flag. So, as a veteran of Korea and an American citizen, what does the American flag mean to you and represent to you?
There's only, in my opinion, there's only one thing more precious in this world than an American flag. That's our love for God. That's the only thing. And if they ever drag that flag completely down and never gets back up, I'm afraid it's going to be awful rough on the religious people in this country, all over the world. Yeah. And I think that, I think President Bush is right. I really do. I really think he's right. And a lot of people disagree with me. A lot of veterans disagree with me. But I think he's right. I think that he's in a position that he knows more than he's allowed to let people know. And I really think it's a serious thing. And I think a lot of people have already forgotten 9/11. And one of the poems on there is called Unconquered. I got to recite that at the 2002 ceremony at the Ripken Stadium in Aberdeen for this I wrote about 9/11. And then G. Gordon Liddy, when he was broadcasting, he let me do it on the air from the Maryland State Fair.
Now, all these poems you've written, do you know them verbatim? You can just...
You can pick up that CD there and call out one. I recite every one. But there's 34 in the book, and some of them are 4 pages long. And some of those, I can do some of all of them, but I probably wouldn't be able to do all of that one.
Just a couple more questions.
Okay.
Sam. What should people remember about the Korean War?
Well, the first thing they should remember, which they probably never heard, is that was the first downfall of communism. When Harry Truman says, we're not going to let communists take over the world, he meant it. And he's my favorite president. Not because of the Korean War, because of the way he handled his presidency. When he said his head and did it, he went ahead with it, no matter what the outcome was. And most of the time, he proved himself to be right.
But he was president for how long?
Almost 8 years, because he took over right after Roosevelt won his 4th election, and he passed away.
45.
Yes. And
so he was president through 53, right? 53?
Yes, and Eisenhower became president.
Good answer. That's good. I think that was all I was going to ask you about Korea. At the end of my interviews, I always like the veteran to give me a salute into the camera, and I understand the protocol of the Marine Corps and the hat standing, but because you're sitting down for the camera, is it okay for you to,
I can.
when I tell you, I'll just...
Okay.
Okay, Sam, right into the camera. Okay, thank you.